Shadow Hack. Chapter 241, Deadlock. Lao Bulletin. Lu Bulletin loudly shouted out. The secret technique user who had possessed extremely keen senses wasn't going to provide any more information because he was already dead. A black runic spear had penetrated his chest. There was a big hole in his chest, revealing his already disintegrated heart. He was clearly dead, without anyone being able to do anything about it. However, this hadn't been a single attack but a shower of them. There were a couple more pointed shadows whistling through the air at that moment. Peng, peng, peng. 3 more people of the Bulletin clan were blown away. Before Lu Bulletin could look at his clansmen to see what was happening, he heard another whistle, this one coming toward him at an extremely fast speed. Runic spears. They're forbidden killing weapons, everyone quickly retreat from the death zone. Lu Bulletin suddenly moved, forcing all of the flux energy out of his body. He raised high his huge axe and fiercely struck down in front of himself. Bang! It sounded as if explosives had just detonated. Lu Bulletin's figure was blown away, while 3 more of his clansmen died. In a hurry, Lu Bulletin crawled back up and led the still alive but injured clansmen in a retreat from the death zone. By then, 7 people from the troops he'd brought with him would never return home. Outside the death zone, G.E.A. and S.H.A.D.W shouted out in unison, "Runic spears." Once they voiced it, they instantly thought of a certain person. Regardless of what was said online, they hadn't expected that he might mature so quickly, to the point that he would now be able to stand in opposition to them. This Lu Bulletin is also quite formidable, what a pity. Li Yunmu made the gesture to stop the attacks. On a mountain behind him, 8 ape gods stopped firing the 4 forbidden weapons. At this time, the ape gods he had captured previously were proving to be extremely effective. During the last month, a complete year had passed in the king's true territory, so Li Yunmu had already tamed the 300 ape gods within his heavenly world. After binding their soul imprints, he had thoroughly turned them into his heavenly world's guardian beasts. The result, the ones responsible for launching the 4 runic spears, were precisely 8 of these ape gods. Lu Bulletin led his people out and retreated outside the edge of the death zone. He was strange, though. Due to the cultivation of some secret technique, his flesh was quite tyrannical. He had surprisingly only relied on his power and reflexes to forcefully stop the fatal attack of the runic spear. Li Yunmu could only accomplish this after he had cultivated his tyrant body to the minor threshold, from which it was clear that this Lu Bulletin was a formidable opponent. Heavens only knew how many formidable people had revealed themselves in this short period of time once everyone found out that the heavenly transformation was looming over their heads. But Li Yunmu had to capture Devil, so today, regardless of who came, he had to stop them all. Time kept passing during this deadlock. S.H.A.D.W and G.E.A. weren't leaving. They were unwilling to accept defeat. If they hadn't been mistaken about the strength of the Devil Kings earlier and gotten injured, they'd still be in their peak combat state. Higher Dimensional Continent's Bulletin clan had 9 people including Lu Bulletin on the scene, since Lu Bulletin was also unwilling to accept his loss. However, 7 of the clansmen he had brought here had already been killed, and his original trump card, the Bulletin clan's secret spell, could no longer be operated. Because of it, he could only wait outside the death zone. He led his people to hide in some place. Before long, a third power for which everyone had been waiting for arrived. The third party to come today was that of Li Yunmu's archenemy, Chaotian Sect. H.A.C.K led the newly elected 5 elites and slowly advanced toward death zone. Besides them, there were 2 more mysterious people with concealed presences following after them. S.H.A.D.W and G.E.A. didn't make any movement, and Lu Bulletin and his clansmen acted the same. All of them sensed a hint of danger from the 2 people following H.A.C.K. Even if they weren't sensing anything extremely dangerous, just the hint of danger was sufficient. Since the continental battle was about to start, these people didn't want to fight since it may lead to injuries. Even the smallest wound wasn't acceptable to them. They wanted to welcome the continental battle in their peak state. H.A.C.K was about to enter the death zone when he took his foot back and spoke up with his head raised toward the sky. Haha, interesting, the person who is acknowledged as the most powerful person in the fifth dimension has been surprisingly prevented today from entering the death zone. Clearly, he had already discovered Zhanbei and Gea. He also suddenly looked at the hiding place of Buletin clan. While he kept fanning himself, a smile yet not a smile appeared on his face. Seems like we have no need to hide. Lu Buletin came out of hiding with his clansmen and forward in a majestic gait. It had been barely a few minutes since he had been injured by the runic spear, yet surprisingly he had almost completely healed by now, which clearly illustrated his body's constitution as well as the marvelous effects of Buletin clan's healing medicines. Humph, Chaotian Sect, what a coincidence seeing you here. Gea and Zhanbei also walked out of the forest. Hehe, there are many clever people in the world. Seems the lot of you and this young master were thinking the same thing. It's highly likely that Devil has 3 parts of the Azure Dragon deity suits in his possession. Why don't we 3 join hands and divide the 3 parts among us? One of the 5 elites suggested while laughing. Lu Buletin glanced at the elite disciple who was standing behind H.A.C.K, then turned away while saying coldly, "Here you don't have the qualifications to speak." You. The 5 elites of Chaotian Sect spoke up simultaneously, but in the end, resisted the temptation to say anything. Chaotian Sect is going lower and lower. A majestic upper-tier sect appointed some women as elites just because they are beautiful. H.A.C.K, your ancestor has been truly considerate of you. Gea mischievously laughed, while his gaze kept moving over the bodies of the elite disciples without any restraint. H.A.C.K found it unsightly, but he didn't flare up and indifferently said, "Gea, I didn't expect a deserter of divine religion like you to join hands with Zhanbei. Since we've all come for Devil, then let's not create internal strife and let another take advantage of us. Using our tongues unnecessarily would only create misunderstandings, allowing the person inside to grow even stronger." Don't tell me, you know who's the person inside that attacked us. A baleful and threatening aura rose from Lu Buletin, and a hint of ruthlessness flashed through his eyes. If my guess isn't wrong, the man inside is Li Yunmu. While H.A.C.K heard that name, his breath became somewhat unstable. Hate consumed him. He deeply hated this person. However, Li Yunmu had already matured enough to make him and Chaotian Sect feel pressure. That's right, our guess should be right. It can only be him. After all, he is the only one who has runic spears, Zhanbei said indifferently. When the 3 sides heard the name of a forbidden weapon, their hearts sank gloomily. Li Yunmu was a trifling matter. If the 3 of them joined hands, then he certainly wouldn't be able to stop them. However, one of the 10 forbidden weapons, the runic spear, gave them all a fright. Moreover, the opponent had not 1 but 4 of them under his command. Everyone was filled with resentment. That lower flux sage of the Fluxer Association must have been possessed to break such a big taboo and use 4 forbidden weapons to try and capture Li Yunmu. After all, his opponent had snatched all of them, turning them all into a major assistant on his road to success. What can we do? The death zone is shrouded in death aura all the time, which greatly suppresses our senses. Even if join hands and intrude, we still won't be able to easily deal with the forbidden weapons. Since one side had a superior location and had prepared in advance, even if its attackers joined hands, which would give them superiority in numbers and power, none of them wanted to take the risk. Since the continental battle was just around the corner, who would dare to be reckless? Chapter 242, Actual War. No one was willing to take the risk. If the location had been different, then although the forbidden weapons would still remain terrifying, all these overlords could evade them with their speed. The weapons would simply be unable to lock upon them. If that was the case, they'd have a good chance to win. However, in the death zone, everyone's senses were suppressed. They basically couldn't respond in advance and dodge, so they were unwilling to take the risk. In the end, the three parties chose to conceal themselves and calmly wait for an opportunity. The four overlords were convinced that since they were able to guess that Devil was in one of the 10 forbidden zones, then there would be other powers in the 6 continents who would have guessed as well and thus come in search of him. Their guess soon turned out to be right. A fourth power arrived when the night began to fall on the land. Extreme Devil Path Sect's Yan-Xing. When the four recognized the fourth power, they were all faintly startled inside. What a great strategy! Surprisingly, Yan-Xing was still alive. Rumors said that he had perished in an ambush. Because of that, no one expected to suddenly see him roaming here a few days before the continental battle. Or that he might have also thought about catching Devil, who was very likely to be in possession of 3 Azure Dragon deity suit parts. The Extreme Devil Path Sect had sent many people, and each of them had 2 large swords crossed on their back. All the people also seemed to be walking forward in a special pattern. Clearly, the Extreme Devil Path's Yan-Xing hadn't come alone but had also prepared the Extreme Devil killing spell of their sect. This time, none of the 3 sides in hiding nearby made any movements. All of them felt that if they met up now, the battle between them couldn't be avoided. And if they faced off against each other, no one could tell what the outcome would be. At this moment, few people outside knew that overlords, class rivals who thirsted for each other's blood, were actually silently skulking about at the edge of the death zone. Now that all these powers had come together, the scene could detonate at any moment. The people of Extreme Devil Path were left baffled by Yan-Xing's lead. After bursting in without any knowledge, he soon cautiously led them back. This was because he had quickly discovered something strange. At the entrance of the death zone, there were clear traces of a recent battle. There were remnants of formidable presences around as well. The people of Extreme Devil Path weren't stupid. They quickly retreated and chose a location to hide, deciding to calmly observe the situation for the time being. Since someone had already rushed in before them, then even if they were careful, they might not be able to avoid danger. Hence, Extreme Devil Path also decided to use someone else as cannon fodder to see what the situation inside was. Under these circumstances, a 5th power also arrived. A group of extremely muscular barbarians dressed uniformly soon came up to the entrance to the death zone. The leader's powerful presence was through the heavens, and he had an enormous body stature that resembled a giant's, reaching a height of 3 meters. Under his command, there were 8 formidable barbarian people who were holding wheel-shaped battle axes. Their presences were threatening, and their copper skin was painted with all sorts of different marks. Each of them was at least 2.5 meters tall. This group of people stepped inside while emitting terrifying killing intent. It's Mammoth Barbarian Clan S.H.A.D.W. Once this person appeared, not only did the first 4 groups suddenly feel apprehensive, even Li Yunmu narrowed his eyes. Mammoth Barbarian Clan S.H.A.D.W. was the grandson of one of the 4 barbarian kings and also someone who had entered the list of overlords. In fact, he was considered among the forerunners on the list. The enormous strength of his body could be considered as peerlessly powerful. According to rumors, since the time Mammoth Barbarian Clan S.H.A.D.W. was born, Barbarian King Huang had focused on nurturing him and merged the formidable bloodline of a giant king with him. He had been secretly cultivating in the depths of a mountain forest in the desolate continent and had never revealed himself, until recently. Due to the heavenly transformation, he was forced to appear in front of the eyes of the masses and easily cleared the 72nd level of the Tower of Glory in one breath. Although his combat strength hadn't been surveyed because of the lack of first-hand authentic material, this Mammoth Barbarian Clan S.H.A.D.W. was considered to be one of the 3 most dangerous overlords. From this, the profoundness of his yet unknown strength could be clearly seen. The majority of powerful people even claimed that Mammoth Barbarian Wang's strength had already attained the level where he could threaten supreme overlords like Man Tian, Zihanbei, Zhang Huia, and the few others on that level. No one present around this death zone had expected that this person who had the most mysterious foundation would surprisingly appear here. Zihanbei and Jie looked at each other in dismay. They suddenly felt that the matter was getting more and more out of control with each passing second. Both of them had absolute confidence in the other's strength, but the appearance of so many powers in succession gave rise to a hint of a threat in their hearts. It wasn't that they feared these newly appeared sons and grandsons, but that behind these people stood powers with extremely profound foundations and reserves. Let's go. It has already gotten out of our control. Even if the 3 parts of the Azure Dragon deity suit will be snatched from Devil's hand, with only our strength, we probably won't manage to grab them. Let's leave Li Yunmu to duke it out with the others. Regardless of who'll win, it'll be beneficial to us, Zihanbei said. He was also a firm person. Since he decided to leave, he immediately did just that. Once he sensed danger, he immediately chose to relinquish the intention to fight. It was clear from this that he was worthy of being called the most powerful person in the 5th dimension. Jie still appeared to be unwilling, but he clearly understood his partner's mindset. The two of them then left without informing Yeqing or Lu Buletin. The next scene proved Zihanbei's guess. During the night, several enormous powers appeared one after another. Lu Buletin also understood that the situation was out of his control now, so he decided to retreat with his clansmen as well. If he hadn't lost any clansmen, he could still join the fight, but right now, he had already lost the qualifications. He was quite rational and silently withdrew from the scene. As for Mammoth Barbarian clan Zhuang, he entered the death zone while leading the 18 barbarians. The 3 powers who had arrived just after him almost simultaneously decided against following after him. They could sense that Mammoth Barbarian Zhuang's people fell for a fierce ambush inside. At this time, the powers outside were waiting for the small fries to fight it out and clear the path for them. Bang! Another heaven-shaking explosion resounded. Mammoth Barbarian clan Zhuang kept slashing down again and again. Although he was forced to retreat back 5 steps because of the aftershock from the attack, he had stopped another attack from the forbidden weapon. As for the 18 people who had come together with him, each group of 4 had raised a huge shield emitting coppery light and were slowly crawling forward. Another 3 runic spears slammed against these coppery shields with terrifying momentum and power, but surprisingly, Li Yunmu's forbidden weapons installed at the top of the mountain were still stopped. They hadn't used any exceptional method to do so, relying solely on brute force and thick defense of the copper shields to stop the attacks. Everyone keep moving. He doesn't have true runic battle spears, Mammoth Barbarian clan Zhuang shouted out using the force of his entire body to encourage his men. Yes, he doesn't have true runic battle spears, otherwise how could we resist against a forbidden weapon with just our brute force and a thick shield? At this time, Li Yunmu stood up after stopping the cultivation of his great son's secret technique and sighed faintly. When he had seized the weapons at first, there had been 4 forbidden weapons which could shoot runic spears, but there were only 12 runic spears. While staying at the king's true territory for a whole year, he had killed a large amount of king-class dimensional beasts and used up all the genuine runic spears long ago. The runic spears he was using now were actually battle spears created using top-notch steel alloys. Their might reached an extraordinary level, up to 60–70% of the original runic spears. Yet after being shot from the 4 mighty forbidden weapons, the disparity between the originals and these revealed how inferior the latter were. Since the runic spears can't stop you, I have no other choice but to settle it myself. Crack! 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 Once Li Yunmu stood up, all the muscles and bones in his body cracked with an explosive sound. While staying in the king's true territory, not only had Li Qinghong and the others greatly improved, Li Yunmu's strength had also swelled. In fact, he currently had no idea about the level of his combat strength. Until now, he hadn't put it to the test. There was nothing he could do about it, though, since he hadn't met any opponent who could force him to go all out. Right now then, since this equally tyrannical barbarian was insistent on intruding, Li Yunmu was filled with expectations regarding the fight. His blood began to boil. 2 red suns appeared in his eyes, and his body began to emit an extremely threatening aura which seemed to be causing ripples in the surrounding space. His eyes gradually locked onto Mammoth Barbarian Clan's Huang underneath. The other also quickly raised his head and looked at Li Yunmu standing atop the mountain in the distance. Mammoth Barbarian Clan's Wahang's expression turned grave. This is Li Yunmu. He was far different from what the intel gathered about him had suggested. He was even more terrifying and formidable than others had come to believe. Chapter 243, Sinister Scheme. Li Yunmu, you can't stop me, nor those that are still outside, Mammoth Barbarian Wahang said in a deep voice. His profound voice reverberated throughout the entire surrounding space. Whether I can stop you or not, we will know after we battle. Li Yunmu remained unmoved. The energy in his body continued to rumble around, and his threatening aura continued to rise higher and higher, finally attaining its peak. Continental battle is about to begin. I don't want to have a tough battle with you and make things easier for others. Mammoth Barbarian Wahang was 3 meters tall, but that didn't mean he also had a large brain. When he had come here leading a group of 18 barbarians, he was filled with extreme confidence. But after he looked at Li Yunmu standing atop the mountain peak, the idea of an all-out battle completely disappeared from his mind. Frankly speaking, the threatening aura about Li Yunmu had caused a hint of fear to take form in his heart. Usually, he would be extremely excited to battle someone, but at this most crucial time, he didn't want to have a fierce battle, especially when there were still many people concealed nearby, just waiting for their opportunity. Who would want a third person to obtain all the benefits from their battle? Then retreat. Li Yunmu didn't yield in the slightest. Azure Dragon Deity battlesuit was something that he had to have. Unlike others, he already possessed 2 parts of the battlesuit, so he needed to obtain the last 3 even more than them. His resolve, thus, was much greater than that of others. Mammoth Barbarian Wahang's eyes began to shine brilliantly and he said in a deep muffled voice, "Retreat?" Haha, in the vocabulary of Mammoth Barbarian Wahang, the word retreat doesn't exist. Very good, since you're going to be stubborn about it, let me experience absolute power today. His blood seemed to have begun boiling at this moment. It continued to raise in temperature as he grew more and more excited. He then began to transform as a whole as if he was being filled with air, and his height started to slowly increase. He reached 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.5 meters, but he still continued growing. He truly transformed into a giant. Mammoth Barbarian Clan was just as their name suggested, a clan of mammoth-sized barbarians. However, at this time, a barbarian with Herculean physique stationed outside quickly rushed to Mammoth Barbarian Wahang's side and whispered something in his ears. Mammoth Barbarian Wahang then suddenly called back the threatening aura which had been growing because of his transformation and returned to his normal 3-meter size. Good, seems like today we don't need to fight. I only hope that you can hold your own in the continental battle. I'd be really interested in wiping away that arrogance of yours. Mammoth Barbarian Wahang was a straightforward person. He waved his huge hand, and his subordinates retreated from the death zone. The abrupt change in actions had slightly startled Li Yunmu. Yet he put it out of his mind for the moment, and the peak state of threatening aura erupting from him also started to go down. Settling thing without battle was the best. Li Yunmu didn't really want to have an actual battle at this time. He breathed a sigh of relief. He was quite clear that the sudden change in the opponent's attitude was due to some major change in the outside world. However, he was currently within one of the 10 forbidden zones in the 5th dimension. The area around him was filled with the aura of death, and this aura blocked all types of signals, rendering Li Yunmu unable to obtain any information about the outside world. It didn't matter, though. He didn't need to know what it was. All that mattered was that if he could drag this out for a little while longer, Li Qinghong and the others would be able to make their move and obtain the other parts of the Azure Dragon deity suit. Li Yunmu sat down once again at the top of his mountain. Currently, he needed time to preserve his peak state and prepare to ambush even more intruders. The 4 forbidden weapons which shot runic spears were again loaded up by the ape gods, for not every person possessed the brute strength and thick defense of Mammoth Barbarian clan to disregard them. Since the death zone naturally suppressed the senses of those who entered it, the 4 forbidden weapons would continue to prove to be extremely effective. There is something odd about this situation. Given Mammoth Barbarian Wahang's nature, retreat is an impossibility for him. Why is he then withdrawing with all his people? Outside the death zone, 7 powers were staying in wait. All of them saw Mammoth Barbarian Wahang walking away with a snort, and they it quite bizarre. They immediately started investigate the reason. Soon, they received some authentic news from the powers behind them. Frontline Heaven's frontline god was still in possession of his 2 parts of the Azure Dragon deity suit. This was made clear when not long ago, the masters of the 6 transcending powers had an unprecedented meeting with the Fluxer Association. Since the news came from such a place, the information was certainly not wrong. In other words, Devil has only 1 part of the Azure Dragon deity suit on him. Swiftly, many powers realized the reason behind Mammoth Barbarian Wahang's retreat. If Devil only had 1 part of the Azure Dragon deity suit, then this matter lost all of its attraction. Even though 1 part of the Azure Dragon deity suit was a pretty good item, the strategic advantage of owning 3 parts far surpassed it. Not only did this matter lose all its good points because of the news, it also became a headache. After all, it was just verified that 2 parts of the Azure Dragon deity suit were in the possession of Frontline God, and no power wanted to stand opposite a master of a transcending power just for a single part of the Azure Dragon deity suit. Since the profit wouldn't outweigh the losses, none of the powers wanted to take needless risk. When they left, 1 person's name was etched in their hearts: Li Yunmu. This newcomer powerhouse had forced Mammoth Barbarian Wahang, who was quite a powerful character himself, to retreat. From this moment on, few people will dare to belittle Li Yunmu. Even though he had taken advantage of time, location, and many other things to create a deadlock with the different powers, it couldn't be denied that he did have some strength. Seems like this Li Yunmu will turn out to be a formidable opponent. Do not belittle him just because he recently started on his path. Before long, most powers also left the area. Only Chaotian Sect's Ye-Ching stayed behind. Young Master, you said that it is quite improbable for Li Yunmu to possess the other parts of the Azure Dragon deity suit whose locations are unknown. One of the elite female disciples said with doubt in her voice. It's almost impossible. From the 2 missing part of the Azure Dragon deity battle suit, one is Azure Dragon Pearl, which is the most powerful and the hardest to obtain part. Until now, there have been no news about it. As for Azure Dragon Gauntlets, they had appeared in the hands of some Flux sage 20 years ago. Their real whereabouts, though, are unknown to this day. This Li Yunmu is really overestimating his abilities, trying to fight against us, another female elite coldly sneered. Let's go inside and meet him. Ye-Ching didn't seem to have any intention to fight, yet once the others had left, he was still standing around. He called out to Lu Buletin, who had also hidden at the same time as him, then to Zhanbei and Gea, but received no response. Quickly, he guessed that they had left some time ago. This firmed his decision even more. Leading the group of people from Chaotian Sect, he entered the death zone. Li Yunmu, our Chaotian Sect wants to cooperate with you, Ye-Ching shouted out from far away. Cooperate? Does your Chaotian Sect still have some credibility left? Li Yunmu smiled. Currently, Chaotian Sect didn't have any face to be called an upper-tier sect in the outside world. This was especially so because they had elected 5 enchanting and pretty females as their 5 elite disciples. For such a decision, they were ridiculed by the whole world. A majestic upper-tier sect was acting in complete disorder, without any sense of dignity. Haha, as for whether we have credibility or not, that isn't important. The important thing is that this cooperation will be extremely beneficial to you, Ye-Ching said with a fake smile. In his heart, he hated Li Yunmu to death. If the opponent wasn't sitting atop a mountain peak far away and was in possession of 4 forbidden weapons, he might have already attacked. Maybe then he'd have gotten rid of this bastard who had messed up Chaotian Sect's plans. Li Yunmu paused for a moment before replying. Then let me hear it. I'm an honest person, as long as there are sufficient benefits, I'll still consider cooperating with you. He wanted to know what kind of nasty scheme this second great-grandson of Chaotian Sect's flux ancestor wanted to spring on him. Chapter 244, Swindling Chaotian Sect. Our Chaotian Sect had an internal meeting over this matter. As long as you hand over the refining pagoda to us, we will definitely leave you be. In fact, we are even willing to make an exception and allow you and your followers to enter Chaotian Sect and become 6th Peaks Elite. Furthermore, Li Yunmu, my family's ancestor has decided to make an exception and accept you as his successor disciple. This position would be second only to my own. H.A.C.K put forth all the conditions with a smile. In his opinion, since Chaotian Sect was giving in like this, it was the greatest proof of their sincerity. Li Yunmu was just a trifling flux disciple. If word that a big sect like Chaotian Sect had made great promises and assurances to someone like him came out, it would certainly shake all 6 continents. Even H.A.C.K himself was a little bit envious of such consideration shown to an outsider. But there was nothing he could do. Chaotian Sect lacked a transcending sage treasure now, and there wasn't much time until the heavenly transformation arrived. Li Yunmu had rushed to obtain the refining pagoda's pagoda spirit, which was something Chaotian Sect needed desperately. Otherwise, how could the group of sage-level characters within the sect be willing to compromise with a mere flux disciple? When Li Yunmu heard the benefits offered by the other party, he was left astonished. What the F***ck are these sufficiently large benefits? It was true that for other fluxers stepping into a huge boat called Chaotian Sect and becoming the successor disciple of their ancestor would be a dream they could never reach, but for Li Yunmu it was completely worthless. He had the system, so the kind of benefits Chaotian Sect offered were the ones he least cared about. With such an offer, how could he be willing to kneel down and become a lackey of Chaotian Sect? How about it? As long as you agree to it, our Chaotian Sect will make the proclamation to the whole world that this time I, H.A.C.K, had personally come to show sincerity and make a friend of an enemy. From now on, you would be Chaotian Sect's core member and could move freely in the whole world, H.A.C.K said, continuing to try and tempt him. There's nothing to it. I refuse, but you can fulfill a different request, Li Yunmu said indifferently. He had taken his personal strength and calculated how likely he was to kill this group from Chaotian Sect here, and he didn't like his chances. The presence of the 2 mysterious people by H.A.C.K's side forced him to dispel any thoughts of attacking. Difficult, too difficult. H.A.C.K was the second great-grandson of the sect ancestor who cared about him the most. He would certainly have many life-saving tricks up his sleeve, and based on the power Li Yunmu could sense from the 2 people by his side, he definitely had no certainty in being able to kill H.A.C.K. Another request. H.A.C.K was startled. He hadn't expected that this person would refuse Chaotian Sect's kind intentions. That's right, for example, your Chaotian Sect could hand over its 2 parts of refining pagoda to me, Li Yunmu said with a faint smile. Don't even dream of it. Li Yunmu, you're refusing to raise a toasto only to drink and forfeit. H.A.C.K was sure enough the 3rd generation descending from a sage. Once his request wasn't accepted, he couldn't tolerate it and immediately threatened the other party. So, does that attitude of yours mean that you don't fancy my void disk? Li Yunmu asked, revealing the true meaning of his words. Void disk? You mean you want to use void disk to exchange for 2 parts of refining pagoda? Instantly, H.A.C.K's breath became unsteady, and excitement appeared in his eyes. Chaotian Sect lacked a transcending sage tool, whether it was refining pagoda or void disk didn't matter at all. All they cared about was obtaining one more transcending sage tool before the day of heavenly transformation. That's right. I have some interest in refining pagoda. If your Chaotian Sect wants to show your sincerity, then you can make a trade with me. But you'll have to add something extra since my void disk is a complete transcending sage tool. Good. I will first return to the sect to report this matter. In 2 days, you will have an answer. H.A.C.K hesitated for a long time, but finally agreed. He immediately left with the people of Chaotian sect and rushed back to the sect. H.A.C.K and his group hurriedly rushed out of the death zone. After they came out, one of the 5 female elites who wasn't willing to accept such a trade said, "Young master, this person thinks our Chaotian sect is foolish. Although Void Disk is also a transcending sage tool like Refining Pagoda, Refining Pagoda's effect in battle is far more valuable than that of Void Disk." Shut up. I will report this matter to the sect. As for whether they decide to trade or not, it's not something you'll have a say in. At this moment, H.A.C.K couldn't care less about what the female elites were thinking. At this moment, he only wished he could fly back to the sect and report this matter. Refining Pagoda could only be obtained after crossing the 70th level of the Tower of Glory and far surpassed Void Disk, which could be used to break restrictions, in value. However, Chaotian sect only required a 6th transcending sage tool and didn't care for it to be a specific one. Since the women by H.A.C.K's side were foreordained to be his furnaces, how could they have learned about the most important secret of Chaotian sect? Li Yunmu apparently didn't wish to be Chaotian sect's enemy. Given his actions, it was clear that he wanted to ease the tensions between the two of them. When Li Yunmu heard that the powers outside had retreated, he relaxed. He had prepared all sorts of methods to ambush the other powers, but it didn't seem like there was going to be any need for it anymore. Naturally, a hint of regret also rose in his heart. Since all the powers had withdrawn, that meant that Devil only had one part of the Azure Dragon deity suit. If Li Yunmu wanted to gather the entire suit, he would still have to confront Frontline God, this mountain which couldn't be climbed. However, Li Yunmu only needed to move step by step. Even if it was only one item, he had to get his hands on it. As long as he had 3 parts of the Azure Dragon deity suit, on the eve of the heavenly transformation, he would have sufficient capital to protect himself. System, what do you think? Will Chaotian sect be fooled and really take out the 2 parts of Refining Pagoda to trade with us? If it had been normal times, then the probability of the group of crafty old men at Chaotian sect being fooled would be extremely low. However, the times are chaotic now, which makes it difficult to say. There is a 50-50 chance. The system also found it hard to predict anything. The heart of a person is unfathomable. The direction taken by an upper-tier sect was determined by the decisions of many people. At this moment, Li Yunmu's only hope was that Chaotian sect would be desperate enough to obtain the 6th transcending tool that it would agree to trade away the 2 parts of Refining Pagoda. The arrival of the heavenly transformation was imminent, so there wasn't much time left for Chaotian sect to consider this issue. When pressed on time, its chances of making a mistake would increase. After the system's comprehensive assessment, it had surprisingly given Li Yunmu's plan a 50% chance of success, which made him extremely excited. In fact, the utility of Refining Pagoda for him was far higher than that of Void Disk. If he could obtain the 2 parts of Refining Pagoda from Chaotian sect, then that would naturally serve as an enormous foundation for him. As for using Void Disk for the trade, there wasn't any need to even think about it. How could Li Yunmu give away something which would help his enemy become even more powerful? Could manufacturing a phony Void Disk help us in fooling them? The answer to this question was not known to Li Yunmu because he hadn't asked it yet. When the system had been upgraded to the 4th level, 3 new abilities had appeared. Among them, one was for duplication of dimensional items. As long as he had the right amount of space elements, he could duplicate any dimensional item, but the requirements were extremely harsh. Even with the space elements accumulated by Li Yunmu during these days, a duplicated transcending sage tool could only be effective for a single day. However, as long as Chaotian sect was fooled, even if only for one day, the complete Refining Pagoda would end up in his hands. Chapter 245, The Combined Punch of a Human and 8 Shadows. After being upgraded to the 3rd level, the system had gained 3 new abilities. First ability was the replication of dimensional items. However, it could only replicate dimensional items since the intrinsic nature of dimensional products lay somewhere between material and energy form. This is also the reason why all such items could be taken into the virtual dimension. After testing the ability, Li Yunmu discovered that if he replicated a transcending sage weapon like Void Disc, he would need at least 9,000 space elements, and the copy would exist only for a day. During that day, if he used the replicated item, its effects would be like the original Void Discs. It would break all shackles and restrictions. But it could only used one time. If it was used more than once, it would immediately disappear. Thus, if Li Yunmu wanted to successfully cheat Chaotian Sect, he would need at least 20,000 space elements. It was important that the replicated product would last for at least 2 days and could be used twice so that if the enemy tested it once, its secret wouldn't be exposed. Fortunately, after hacking for the past couple days, Li Yunmu had accumulated a large number of space elements. It actually reached an unprecedented amount. The second ability gained by the system allowed shadows to appear as humans. He only needed to throw in some space elements, and the 8 shadows would take human form, which would allow them to walk openly on Earth. This kind of thing satisfied Li Yunmu quite a lot. It would remove a major headache for him and Li Yun, Li Feng, Li Dai, Li Tian, Li Mei, Li Lan, Li Zhu, Li Ju, since they could now easily transform into their avatars established in the dimensional battlefield. The final ability was the previously mentioned ability to create cultivation relaying globes. After reaching the 4th level, the cultivation relaying globes created by the system became even more perfect. After the people of Chaotian Sect retreated, Li Yunmu concealed his presence once again and continued to guard the Death Zone's entrance. Until he got his hands on a part of the Azure Dragon deity suit, he couldn't lower his guard. In the depths of the Death Zone, Li Qinghong, Underworld Hand, Devil Monkey, and the others had used half a day to lay down numerous layers of traps, creating a dragnet in the surroundings of the cliff. This was Devil's main nest, so they had to make all sorts of traps and warning systems to make sure that there were no flaws in their plans. Since the other party possessed the Azure Dragon leg guards, his speed could be considered as the highest in the 5th dimension. They couldn't be the least bit careless in their mission to ambush Devil. Lin Jian and the others created an inescapable net along the route which had to be taken to reach this place. Now they only needed to wait for the main character to show up. This wait lasted for a whole day. Morning slowly passed by, followed by noon, and even the zombies in this area didn't stir during this time. But Devil still didn't appear. Finally, very late at night, a black human figure appeared in front of Li Qinghong and the others who were ready with all sorts of methods to hunt down their target. Bang! 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 Instantly, the 7 followers activated the Dark Flux 8 spell banner. The human figure became greatly alarmed after accidentally entering the spell. Soon though, Devil displayed his astonishing speed. One instant he was still underneath the cliff, but the next, he had already covered a distance of 300 meters, reaching the edge of the deadly spell. He launched a heavy kick which ruthlessly struck the spell's cover. Under the attack of his explosive kick, the cover rippled, instantly showing signs of breaking. Not good, he is using the power of the Azure Dragon leg guards, that kick sure was powerful. However, Devil was forced to pull back his next kick because the killing spell had completely activated by then. In an instant, he lost all his senses. He no longer knew that he was running around in circles in the several 100-meter area of the spell and nothing more. Flame Devil, attack! Barbarian Niu had obtained the Earth Fire Dark Flux energy from the King's true territory, so he was in control of the heat flag. Swiftly, he activated it, and 1, 2, 5, 8 fire devils took shape. Each of them was 5 meter tall, and they immediately attacked Devil, who had been caught up by the heat region. Fire ropes, coil around him. Fire dragon descend from heaven. Fire eruption. Fire Prison. Because of the amplification provided by the Dark Flux 8 spell banner, the earth fire energy released by Barbarian Neo was absolutely terrifying. He could now use all types of deadly earth fire spells with ease. In simple words, he was equivalent to a half-step flux master at this moment. Given the large amount of earth fire energy under his control, he wasn't inferior to a half-step flux master, apart from the fact that his strength hadn't surpassed the limit of the 5th dimension. Heaven Blade Spell, Heavenly Blade, Heavenly Demon Descend. At this time, Blade Overlord Lin Jian unleashed his Blade Intent Fiend energy and congealed numerous powerful Blade Intent Fiends which attacked Devil in the killing spell. Regardless of which direction he went in, there were powerful attacks waiting for him once he approached that area. When Nangang Gongzi saw this from outside, he was extremely startled. This was Dark Flux 8 spell banner. Although the 8 flag killing spell was incomplete, the majestic second most powerful halted Fluxer Devil didn't seem to be able to hold on for much longer within it. Even his Azure Dragon's leg guards weren't helping him in his predicament. Regardless of where he went, endless attacks met him there. Devil is finished, Nangang Gongzi thought. For the first time, he had seen the terror of the Dark Flux 8 spell banner. Li Qinghong and the others had unleashed the killing spell once Devil had entered its area. However, at that moment, Li Yunmu suddenly sensed something and stood up. He looked downwards and said to himself, "Impressive ghostly image substitution evasion technique." I knew Nangang Gongzi wasn't being completely honest. At this moment, the 2 Devil Kings were guarding the only entrance to the death zone. "Ha, Li Yunmu, that time at the Moro Mountain Tenebrous Hidden Domain, I hadn't provoked you, but you still came to ambush me. Good. This extremely sinister sounding voice which could scare anyone came from the pitch black ground underneath. Its owner really deserved to be called devil by the common folk. His voice clearly resembled that of a devil and was unlike that of people or ghosts. There isn't any right or wrong, neither that time nor today. Everything is only based on strength. Li Yunmu sneered, "If I didn't have enough strength to frighten you that time, then you would have attacked me long ago. Now hand over your part of the Azure Dragon deity suit." Li Yunmu didn't talk any more nonsense. His expression became ruthless, as if he could see through the space and was looking directly into Devil's eyes. "Humph, just you alone? Even Li Qinghong and her group couldn't capture me, so you won't stand a chance, either," Devil answered, his voice still coming from somewhere far off. Soon though, a dark line suddenly appeared on the pitch-black ground underneath. This dark line was moving extremely fast, resembling a ray of light. When it started moving, it covered half a kilometer in an instant, and soon passed the 2 Devil Kings defending the Death Zone's entrance. Devil had spoken correctly. Since he possessed the Azure Dragon leg guards, as long as he wasn't caught in a spell formation, Li Qinghong and the others couldn't catch up to him, and neither could Li Yunmu. Although he hadn't expected that Li Yunmu would have concealed his strength so deeply that he could surprise everyone and defend the only entrance to the death zone, it didn't matter much. Since Devil hadn't been caught by the killing spell, the outcome of this ambush had already been decided. Although Nangang Gongzi had indeed betrayed Devil's Nest, he had also used some unknown method to secretly reveal Li Yunmu's followers' plans. Devil had drawn support from the darkness and unleashed ghostly image substitution evasion technique and escaped this calamity. Right then, Li Yunmu alone wouldn't be able to stop him. However, he was mistaken about this. Although he was the fastest person in the 5th dimension, and had even already passed the 2 Devil Kings guarding the entrance, he couldn't leave the restraints of a treasure. At the entrance of the death zone, an enormous heavenly disk suddenly tore through the black ground and rose into the air. Void Disk. Ka-cha! Void Disk which had just risen from the ground made a rotation in the air, and Devil felt as if a pressure came crashing down upon him from all sides. He cried out in pain. He then turned back into the dark line using the ghost evasion technique, but it was forcibly blocked from moving ahead by the restriction in the air. Still, Devil persevered with the technique, though alarm appeared on his face. You idiots don't understand what a transcending sage tool represents. Since Void Disk can break through all restrictions, naturally it is also capable of restricting everything. Li Yunmu's voice seemed to be coming closer as it echoed in Devil's ears. However, he only felt the restrictions placed on his body. Suddenly, a destructive power landed on his body, destroying it and his consciousness. This power was quite formidable. It contained numerous crazily destructive dark flux energies as well as an extremely pure and enormous flux energy. It also had a terrifying world power and an irresistible power of the flesh. Very powerful, this punch? No, these 9 punches combined into one. This one punch surpasses the limits of the 5th dimension. Can this attack still be called an attack by a human? It's even more terrifying than what Zhanbei can do. How could that be? These were the last thoughts in Devil's mind. Chapter 246, Surpassed Expectations. Ka-cha. In the Fluxer Badge Library, another Fluxer Badge suddenly broke and shattered. Regarding this matter, the manager and members responsible for the badges weren't too surprised. These type of matters happened every day. There was a team of people which was specially created to take record of it. In the 6 continents, there were countless Fluxers. Around 10,000 of them died every day like it's nobody's business. The person who went to make a record suddenly cried out in surprise, "Devil, it's Devil's badge that broke." The manager wrinkled his brows. Are you a child or what? Even sage-level Fluxers perish every day. Why are you creating such a ruckus about one person's death? I'm not. It's just that, sir, Devil, it's Devil who died. Someone from the recording personnel exclaimed. This time, the manager also reacted, crying out in surprise, what? Devil? 5th dimension's 2nd most powerful halted Fluxer, that Devil. Yes. This is not good. It's very important news, I must quickly report it to the superiors. Devil had died. From some angles, Devil's death was of even more importance than that of an ordinary sage. It had to do with Devil's place in the world. He was the 2nd most powerful person in the 5th dimension. He had also recently crossed the 70th level of the Tower of Glory, which gave him the qualifications to enter the continental battle, and he was also one of the overlords. The above-mentioned titles might have made him an extraordinary character, but they would still fall short in meaning compared to the death of even an ordinary sage. However, he possessed the Azure Dragon leg guards. On Earth, there were 5 supreme battle suits known to man. Every part of these suits attracted attention from many enormously formidable people. And besides owning such a part, Devil had also died on the eve of the continental battle. The manager of the Fluxer Library felt that this matter was extremely important. Could Frontline Heaven's Frontline God have succeeded in obtaining the battlesuit's part? If Frontline Heaven's Frontline God had indeed obtained it, then this transcending powers master would now be in possession of 3 parts of the Azure Dragon deity suit, which would greatly change Earth's power equilibrium. Within a split second, the master of the Fluxer Badge Library issued a strict order to conceal the news of Devil's death, and then rushed out. Since the Fluxer Association had lost the Flux ancestor, this enormous dragon was no longer the same. Even though it was considered to be the most powerful organization in the history of Earth, it had already rotted to its core. The Fluxer Badge Library could know the moment any Fluxer died, and other powers weren't blind to how important that kind of information was. The manager wanted to conceal the information about Devil's death, but little did he know that his department had been infiltrated by all sorts of powers from the 6 continents since a long time ago. Soon, on the online network, a big news suddenly spread: Devil had died. This information flew across the 6 continents like a typhoon. For ordinary Fluxers and normal people, Devil's death wasn't of much importance. Especially now, in this chaotic period when formidable Flux disciples were rising one after another. The so-called 2nd most powerful halted Fluxer Devil dying did not surprise them in the least. However, for those who understood the situation well, this news was equal to an earthquake. Not long ago, Devil had appeared in the vicinity of a transcending power frontline heaven, so many people had been guessing whether Devil now had 3 parts of the Azure Dragon deity suit on his body. Even people like Yeching, Lu-Buletin, Mammoth Barbarian Wohang, and others had moved because of this probability. And now, Devil had died? This was a major shake. This kind of matter happening at such a crucial time was certainly a major earthquake. Devil himself wasn't important, though. All everyone cared about was whether he'd had 3 parts of the Azure Dragon deity suit or 1. And who was it that had finally killed Devil? It had to be known that Frontline Heaven's frontline god had been trying to ambush Devil for the past 2 years to obtain the 3rd part of the Azure Dragon deity suit, but hadn't succeeded. So who could have succeeded in killing Devil? Frontline god's head butler's trick to use other people to draw out their target was really quite vicious. However, even he mustn't have expected that Devil would really be killed by someone. When the masters of one of the transcending powers obtained the news that Devil had died, they couldn't refrain from sighing. After all, Frontline god's head butler had used this kind of trick with such suddenness that none of them had managed to react. Apparently, Devil had never appeared in the vicinity of Frontline Heaven. In fact, he hadn't even appeared in the real world. The news of him doing so that had spread before was actually the scheme of Frontline God. He had rushed to release this false information just before the continental battle to create the suspicion that Devil might have come to rely upon him and would now participate in the continental battle with 3 parts of the Azure Dragon deity suit. All of this resulted in Devil's death, once he was ambushed by all sorts of people seeking Azure Dragon deity suit parts. However, when the great characters received the news of Devil having been killed in an ambush, they couldn't believe their ears. Devil was the fastest person in the 5th dimension. Not one of such, but actually the fastest. Also, what most didn't know was that not only was he the fastest, he had also cultivated several ghostly evasion life-saving techniques. With his speed and ghost evasion techniques, as well as his extremely cautious personality, even when being hunted by Frontline Heaven, he had still remained alive. The person who killed Devil, who was he? Quickly, the transcending powers obtained some more authentic information. The killer was Li Yunmu. The reason this became a known fact was because the great powers could figure out what happened from the accounts of Chaotian Sect and Lu-Buletin. Devil had been killed by Li Yunmu. This was news which far surpassed everyone's expectations, and Li Yunmu, who had been forgotten for many days, finally returned to the limelight. My God, this is a major matter. In other words, the Azure Dragon leg guards have fallen into Li Yunmu's hands. It's possible, but whether it was really Li Yunmu who killed Devil is still unknown. None of those who had been there saw him in the act. I heard Li Yunmu had entered the death zone long before others. After fighting with a couple Overlord-level characters, he was the last person to remain inside. What a pity. This time Li Yunmu had courted unnecessary trouble. Haha, I think he initially went to get the 3 parts of the Azure Dragon deity suit and had racked his brains trying to kill Devil only to provoke Frontline God. At this moment, he must be worried to death, having just become an enemy of a transcending power. What would he worry about? Can't he take the initiative to gift the Azure Dragon leg guards to Frontline God and earn the friendship of a transcending powers master? This younger sister doesn't understand. The minds of the formidable people are unfathomable, and you greatly underestimate the lure of the 5 supreme battlesuits. At this moment, many people were heatedly discussing Devil's death, but from beginning to end, none of them said that Li Yunmu had reaped great harvest this time. All of them believed that he had just courted disaster. However, no one even considered that Li Yunmu might possess not only the Azure Dragon leg guards he had obtained from Devil but also 2 additional parts of the Azure Dragon Supreme Battlesuit. This was too preposterous to even consider, and even the head butler of Frontline God couldn't gain this information anywhere. The only person who knew was Battle Sage Vega. This Li Yunmu is a little bit surprising. I didn't believe he had a chance at first, but now I'm starting to get more and more interested in his future. When Battle Sage Vega heard about this matter in her temple, she was also slightly startled. The reason why she had tried to find Li Yunmei was simply because Zhang Wei couldn't be sent out, so she had to prepare many other substitutes to represent the central continent. However, the rate at which Li Yunmei was maturing and gained accomplishments had surpassed her expectations. Yes, his lordship Azure Dragon resembles her ladyship in terms of good fortune. The female commander Zhang Wei, who stood at the sage's side, laughed faintly. Chapter 247, Azure Dragon Leg Guards. Bumped. In northern continent's frontline heaven, a middle-aged man lightly slammed his fist on the armrest. His expression was ashen and his mood wasn't good. After verifying Devil's situation 3 to 4 times and confirming that he had really died, this head butler of frontline god and his most trusted subordinate suddenly felt that the situation had gone out of his control. The false information that it was highly probable that Devil had 3 parts of the Azure Dragon deity suit on him was his creation. He had been the one to leak the false news that Devil's tracks had been seen around frontline heaven. His only one aim for doing so was to put Devil in a precarious position where he would be greatly injured and lose the qualifications to participate in the continental battle. Otherwise, if because of the opportunity created by the chaos of heavenly transformation he suddenly went to Earth and disappeared from their map, it would become extremely difficult for Master to get his hands on the part of Azure Dragon deity battlesuit. The best outcome in the mind of the head butler was that Devil would be seriously injured, losing the chance to enter the continental battle. If that happened, in the future, the head butler would think of some method to ambush Devil and get his hands on the Azure Dragon leg guards. Initially, all his plans had been moving forward without a hitch. However, the most undesirable event, which was completely out of his expectations, had happened at the most crucial time. One of Frontline God's rivals understood what was happening and exposed the truth that Frontline God still possessed his 2 part of the Azure Dragon deity suit. Once this information spread out, all overlords who had went to kill Devil lost their motivation and gradually left. This, however, allowed Li Yunmei to wholeheartedly focus on killing Devil. Otherwise, given Devil's fast speed and evasion techniques he had grasped, the worst situation for Devil would have been getting seriously injured and not dying. It simply would have been impossible with everyone competing against each other to catch him. The head butler's plan had considered all factors, but because some rival had leaked the all-important information, his plan was ruined. Moreover, he hadn't expected that Li Yunmei, who had just recently joined the scene, would possess the ability to kill Devil. I underestimated his rivals as well as that youngster who appeared this year. The head butler sighed regretfully. Now that the Azure Dragon leg guards had fallen into Li Yunmei's hands, the head butler could sense a headache coming. Obtaining the parts had now become even harder compared to when Devil was in possession of them. The head butler had truly overestimated himself this time. "Sir, order us. The continental battle hasn't started yet, so we could still dispatch people to negotiate with Li Yunmei. Maybe he would discreetly hand over the Azure Dragon leg guards under the threat of Frontline God. If that doesn't work, we could make an attempt to force him to give them up." The troops of the head butler were the core troops of Frontline Heaven. They included the most powerful people of Frontline Heaven in 5th, 6th, and even 7th dimension. However, after pondering for a bit, the head butler shook his head. He said with a bitter smile, "This youngster Li Yunmei isn't someone whom you could deal with." The head butler, who represented the master of a transcending power, had gathered detailed information about Li Yunmei, this newly appeared overlord. When Devil was in possession of the Azure Dragon leg guards, Frontline God still had the chance to dispatch people to ambush him and be successful in obtaining the Azure Dragon leg guards after killing him. But now, when the Azure Dragon leg guards had fallen into Li Yunmei's hands, the head butler knew that there was no longer much hope in retrieving them. He well understood the defensive capabilities of that youngster. He might not be the most powerful Flux disciple, but he was certainly the most difficult to kill. F***CK. At this time, at a cliff in the deepest parts of the Death Zone, Underworld Hand and the others were wearing gloomy expressions. Devil couldn't hold for long under the Dark Flux 8 killing spell, and within less than a minute, he had been turned to ashes. However, his ashes quickly changed into a little bit of black-colored energy and disappeared. As for a part of the Azure Dragon deity suit, let alone 3 of them, nothing could be found. Could the Azure Dragon leg guards have also been melted by my earthly fire? Barbarian Niu felt that the turn of events was far from encouraging. Although his strength had increased greatly, his brain was still that of a purely barbarian person. If Azure Dragon deity suit could be melted so easily, then would it really be called one of the 5 supreme battle suits known to men? Something's wrong here. This couldn't have been Devil himself, he must have used a substitution technique. All of us were fooled by him. Clever plan. Devil Monkey suddenly turned toward Nangang Gongzi. All the people present on the scene clearly understood what had happened. Devil wasn't ambushed, so he must have known about their plan. Otherwise, he definitely couldn't have been so prepared. At this time, Nangang Gongzi said with indifference, "That's right, I indeed secretly informed Devil." Nangang Gongzi had a mortal enmity with someone. In fact, he was living solely for his vengeance, but if he was forced to betray Devil, then this matter would eternally gnaw at his heart. He also had his pride. "I knew you weren't being honest." The Grand Third most powerful halted Fluxer wouldn't be willing suffer humiliation voluntarily. Fortunately, Master had planned for this, so Devil won't be able to escape, Li Qinghong said without any hint of astonishment at his betrayal. Everyone in the group had clearly experienced Devil's strength today. They also realized why Frontline God hadn't been able to get rid of him for so long. "What, Li Yunmu also came?" Nangang Gongzi's expression changed. If it had happened previously, he wouldn't have cared much about Li Yunmu who had just started training this year, but now that had already changed. After seeing with his own eyes that Li Qinghong and the other 3 followers had successfully obtained strength which rivaled the Overlord class characters, he became quite anxious for Devil. As a matter of fact, the time in which Li Yunmu killed Devil was even shorter compared to what Nangang Gongzi had imagined. Before long, Li Yunmu descended from the sky in front of his followers. "Master, Devil he!" Lin Jian stepped forward with an ashamed expression. "He's already dead." Li Yunmu was pretty delighted, he had finally succeeded in his aim. Although it hadn't happened as he had hoped and Frontline God hadn't given his 2 parts of Azure Dragon deity suit to Devil, but Li Yunmu had still obtained a 3rd part for himself. Now he had Azure Dragon Gauntlets, Azure Dragon Leg Guards, and Azure Dragon Pearl. One part represented the deadly power of arms, while another the explosive power of legs. Both parts which increased offensive power had fallen into his hands. This would greatly make up for the lack of balance between his defense and offense. Furthermore, the Azure Dragon Pearl, this core part would constantly supply him with the Azure Dragon's power. With these 3 parts of the Supreme Battlesuit as well as his personal strength, he was like a tiger who had grown wings. "Did you really kill Devil?" Nangang Gongzi looked at Li Yunmu. As Li Qinghong had said, he had promptly appeared which made worry raise in his heart. But he still hadn't lost all hope, because he was quite familiar with Devil. He knew that Devil wasn't so easy to kill. Perhaps this Li Yunmu's current strength had already surpassed his imagination, but even if Devil wasn't great at combat, fleeing shouldn't be a problem for him. Chapter 248, Cave Labyrinth. "You tell me." Li Yunmu didn't reply to Nangang Gongzi directly, but a transformation began on his King Crystal armor. Golden black dimensional armor covered his whole body and completely merged with the King's crystal armor. His presence became out of ordinary. "Golden black Ghost King armor," everyone simultaneously cried out. This was the temporal layer dimensional armor which Devil had relied upon to make his name. While other people found it difficult to obtain even 5th dimensional armor, because Devil had stumbled upon a secret region, he had obtained the Golden Black Ghost King armor. Although it wasn't a sage armor from the 7th dimension, a temporal layer armor from the 6th dimension was certainly not inferior to ordinary sage-level weapons. After all, the dimensional armors produced naturally were much rarer compared to weapons or other types of treasures. Nangang Gongzi was finally convinced that the newcomer Fluxer had surprisingly disposed of Devil with ease. In a second, he lost all his confidence. Haha, tell me your choice. Li Yunmu didn't say anything directly to Nangang Gongzi, but his eyes were attentively watching him. Nangang Gongzi's expression kept changing endlessly. In the end, though, he sighed deeply and without energy said, "All right, I've betrayed you once, but if you still want me, then I will become your follower willingly." Before this, Lin Jian and Barbarian Niu, as well as all the others, had urged him repeatedly to pay allegiance to Li Yunmu. They had also roughly explained the situation to him. Even if Li Yunmu gave a lot of freedom to his followers and promised to let them leave once they become Flux sages, Nangang Gongzi remained unmoved. That was until now, when he personally witnessed the mysterious methods used by him. Only now did Nangang Gongzi finally decide to serve him. What Blade Overlord had said was correct. If he followed this kind of an exceptional character, he may have a chance at his revenge. Thus, he finally relinquished his pride. Good choice. Li Yunmu nodded and didn't say any more. He had already achieved his goal, so he naturally decided to quickly depart from this region with his followers. They needed to leave to save themselves from a fight with a transcending power frontline heaven. Li Yunmu had now gained a third part of the supreme battlesuit, the Azure Dragon Leg Guards. Until now, he hadn't used any of the battlesuit's components because they were his secret as well as a trump card. He was completely unaware of what he would have to face at the continental battle, which would happen in the shadow of the heavenly transformation. Moreover, once he refined a part of the Azure Dragon deity suit, it would form a unique connection with the other parts. This was the reason why he had never used the two parts which he had obtained previously. Otherwise, Devil would have been alerted, and Frontline God would have also not allowed him to freely use the two parts. Right then, though, the situation had become better for him. The whole world believed that he had no fear of standing up against Frontline God on principle, while the truth was that he actually possessed two parts of the suit already. Wait a minute, Master. Devil possessed many treasures. These are far from it. Devil had already died, and Nangang Gongzi had done what he could. At the moment, since he had become Li Yunmu's follower, naturally he wouldn't hold back such information. He immediately voiced it while everyone was planning to leave. You mean? Li Yunmu began to think about it. When he had killed Devil, he had felt that it was quite strange that a majestic halted Fluxer, a person who had been concealing his strength for so long, was so poor. Li Yunmu had used Void Disc's restriction powers in the fight, so even Devil's badge was restricted, hence it didn't crumble entirely after its owner's death. According to reason, Devil's Fluxer badge shouldn't have been lacking treasures. Yet Li Yunmu had only found the Azure Dragon Leg Guards as well as the golden Black Ghost King armor which he was now wearing. Apart from this, the storage space didn't have any item which entered his eyes. All it contained were some trifling toys as well as some life-saving herbs. Master may be aware that Devil cultivated ghostly image substitution which can be considered as a supreme evasion technique which allows its user to move through space. Long ago, when Devil had unleashed this evasion technique, his storage space had shattered, crushed by the tension created by the evasion technique. Due to it, some of the items inside were lost in some unknown space. Because of it, Devil had then kept all of his treasures accumulated after the event concealed in the fifth dimension. Not once did he put them into his storage badge again, Nangang Gongzi explained, surprising others. He had barely finished when Underworld Hand, Devil Monkey and the others looked towards the cave upon the cliff. That's right, this place had been his lair for a long time. If my guess isn't wrong, then all his possessions should be hidden there. Li Yunmu instantly halted and said with shining eyes, Devil Monkey and others, go search. Supreme Evasion Technique. That devil wasn't a simple but a complicated character. In his fight against Li Yunmu, he had turned into a black light and with astonishing speed fled the scene without giving the two Devil Kings a chance to react. If Li Yunmu hadn't had the little female shadow, the ancestor of the Shadow clan of the 7th dimension, who could be considered the queen of those who walked in the void, he wouldn't have had any hope to ambush Devil. Even discovering his position would have been an impossible task, which was precisely the reason why Devil had been successful in surviving for so long. However, Li Yunmu had killed Devil with ease, because he had the little shadow ancestor who was more formidable than the supreme evasion technique. As for void disk rotating in reverse and creating restrictions, that was just decoration and nothing more. With Li Yunmu's current cultivation, he couldn't display the might of this transcending sage treasure and would have only been able to restrict Devil for a fleeting moment. Even without void disk, as long as the little shadow ancestor could see through the enemy's concealment technique, Li Yunmu could have killed Devil. It just would have been more troublesome. Quickly, the party climbed up the cliff and entered the cave. After searching it carefully, they became aware that this was a completely different world. It was a naturally formed cave labyrinth. The most important part was that it was situated in one of the 10 death zones. The aura of death suppressed the group's senses, so regardless of how formidable they were, coming out of the labyrinth within a short time was impossible. Not long after, both Nangang Gongzi, who was leading the way, and Devil Monkey, who was an experienced explorer, had gotten lost. No matter what methods they used, they still found themselves walking in circles. All of the passages here looked identical. What should we do? We don't lack food or water, but the continental battle is about to start. We cannot remain trapped in here. Even Nangang Gongzi hadn't expected that Devil would have chosen such a deadly trap as his lair. All of them had exhausted all the methods they could think of, but with their senses suppressed, they couldn't find any way out of this predicament. The only solution they had come up with was to explode all the passages and blow a way out of this mountain. However, they were only Flux disciples and nothing more. How could they blow away a mountain? Li Yunmu, though, wasn't the least bit anxious. What's so special about a naturally formed maze? Even though he was in a death zone where all his senses were suppressed, he had no fear. System, how much time would it take to break this maze? Little, it would only require a few minutes. Then quickly break it, and also deduce the probable locations of Devil's treasures. Understood. After the system was upgraded to the 4th level, its deduction power had increased to the next level. Only a few minutes later, an extremely clear map of the cave appeared in Li Yunmu's head. The system had also gathered the data on places where Devil frequently stayed. From them, it determined 3 locations with the highest chance of being the treasure hoard. Chapter 249, The Use of Golden Black Ghost King Armor. After walking through the maze for 2 or 3 hours, the group finally turned a corner which opened into a wide cave hall. Finally! This was the central part of the entire cave. If Li Yunmu hadn't used the system's deduction ability and received a map, they would have arrived here only in a fortnight. Since all their senses were suppressed here, this was no exaggeration. Nangang Gongzi was once more shocked by Li Yunmu's profound abilities. He was certain that this was Li Yunmu's first time entering here, but he acted as if he knew the cave like the back of his hand. Li Qinghong and the others had long ago become accustomed to their master having all sorts of abilities. If Li Yunmu hadn't come up with a way, that instead would have been bizarre. Here, and in this corner. Start digging. After finding the core of the maze, Li Yunmu commanded his people to dig at the 3 locations which could hold the remainder of the treasure. Soon, there was some movement where Demon was digging. He lifted an ancient copper box. It was roughly half a meter long, and a hint of a runic luster occasionally flashed on top of it. Surprisingly, this copper box had extraordinary origins. These are the true 5th dimension's runes. Lin Jian looked the box over once and immediately started explaining its origins. Usually, to open these type of boxes, one must first break the runic code established by their owners. Otherwise, if we try to open it forcefully, a miniature torching spell inside would unleash high-temperature flames which will burn everything within to ashes. Once Li Yunmu heard this, he breathed out a sigh of relief. He had already received the translation of the true 5th dimension's runes from Tang Ruokan, and the system had processed it a long time ago. As long as he allowed the system to analyze Devil's habits and deduce the runic code established by him based on that, this shouldn't be too troublesome. Moments later, the system produced a series of runic code combinations, and Li Yunmu walked toward the box and inputted one of the sequences, but it failed. It didn't matter, though, and he tried again. Failed. 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 After failing 7 times in a row, he finally succeeded in opening the box on the 8th try. Inside, several treasures were revealed, and when Nangang Gongzi and the others saw them, they all were left flabbergasted. These are original manuscripts. My God, all of them are original manuscripts. Where did Devil obtain so many of them? Underworld Hand and the others cried out in surprise. The items were even in perfect condition and were certain to contain everything, because they were the source material. There wasn't any person who wouldn't be startled at the sight of such precious treasures, regardless of how straight-faced they were. Each of these manuscripts could become a basic foundation for a sect and allow it to swiftly rise in power. It must be known that even Li Yunmu and his followers only had one such manuscript, and it was the Great Sun's secret technique of Chaotian sect which Li Qinghong had possessed and nothing more. From this, the rarity of such things could clearly be seen. Original manuscripts were tightly guarded by the sects and other major powers to prevent them from spreading through the world. Li Yunmu's eyes began to shine at the sight of them. He immediately picked up the manuscripts which resembled the bark of a tree and began to observe the profound runes which filled their surface. Surprisingly, the system couldn't understand them. These are the 7th dimension's runes. These original manuscripts are actually from the 7th dimension, Devil Monkey, who had more experience in this field, explained with a serious expression on his face. Sage-level original manuscripts? This thought allowed everyone to understand that this matter was of great importance. Neither of them had expected that Devil would have concealed this sort of exceptional sage-level manuscripts among his treasures, and they were even originals, not copies. What had Devil experienced in his life? What sort of fortuitous encounter had he gone through? As they discovered more and more of the treasures that Devil had concealed, their astonishment grew sky-high. Just one sage-level manuscript was enough to cause Flux sages to fight to the death, so was there any need to speak of Flux disciples? Everyone's breathing became heavy. Li Yunmu had to forcefully calm himself down. Once he did so, he looked at the back of this unknown manuscript and, to his surprise, discovered that it contained the translation of the characters. Clearly, Devil had taken the initiative to translate it for himself. Ghostly image substitution. Li Yunmu took a careful look at the translation, then began to read the fly-sized characters. Li Qinghong and the others didn't dare to speak as he did so. This is the ghostly image substitution technique Devil cultivated. I've never expected it to be a sage-level technique. Nangang Gongzi's expressions kept changing constantly. Quite ferocious. The hearts of other people began to beat loudly. Devil's reserves were just too profound, too ferocious. He had surprisingly comprehended a sage-level secret technique. Li Yunmu didn't conceal anything from his followers. If it had been any other master, they would have been anxious that their followers would exceed them in strength after comprehending this sage-level technique, and they would lose all superiority. This was the reason why the more Lin Jian and others understood Li Yunmu, the more sincerely they served him. There was no explanation regarding the ghostly image substitution technique, because to genuinely comprehend a technique, merely learning a few characters wasn't enough. One had to understand its true essence and practice it repeatedly. The manuscript contained a detailed roadmap of flux energy movements through particular flux points to properly cultivate ghostly image substitution. But when everyone saw the final requirement, they were startled. It was stated that the person who wished to cultivate this technique had to possess the Ghost clan's bloodline. This is. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but laugh bitterly. There was no way they could cultivate this Ghost clan's secret technique. Even if it was a sage-level technique, it was useless to them. Wait a minute, how did Devil cultivate it then? In a split second, a suspicion flashed in everyone's heart. It's because Devil possessed the golden black Ghost King armor. As long as you have a Ghost King armor of the Ghost clan, you can cultivate it, Li Yunmu said, clearing the suspicion in everyone's heart. Their gazes then simultaneously fell on the golden black dimensional armor merged with Li Yunmu's King Crystal armor. The Ghost clan was a native clan of true 6th dimension. It was said that they had been exterminated a few years ago, so it was unknown if there were still any of them left. But regardless of whether it was golden black Ghost King armor or the ghostly image substitution technique, they were clearly the most precious treasures of the Ghost clan. And all of them were part of the treasures concealed by Devil. Devil had definitely encountered the ruins of the Ghost clan in the past. However, I hadn't expected that the entrance to the rumored lost territory of the Ghost clan would surprisingly be in the secondary 5th dimension. Devil Monkey sighed. Everyone continued to puzzle over the technique. They soon discovered that it wasn't the least bit simple, but it wasn't unexpected given that it was a supreme life-saving evasion technique that had been lost in time. According to the explanation of this sage level skill, ghostly image substitution had 99 levels. With each new level of cultivation, the user would congeal an extra ghost body. So once it was cultivated to the 99th level, the person would have 99 ghost bodies. In other words, he would possess 99 lives. F***ing awesome. This is a sage technique, the supreme sage skill of the Ghost clan. Unfortunately for Devil, although he had an additional ghost body, he was still a human. Even if he possessed the Ghost King armor, his cultivation of the ghostly image substitution could only achieve the first level. Otherwise, if he had cultivated many levels of this skill, Li Yunmu wouldn't have been able to kill him. Very good, with this supreme evasion technique, my ability to survive will raise by a good margin. Li Yunmu was very excited. Inside, he felt unexpectedly moved. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this supreme evasion technique surpassed everything else he'd received by 1,000 times. Chapter 250, Soul Refinement. Soon, the group discovered several more original manuscripts in the ancient copper box. Surprisingly, all of them were cultivation methods of the Ghost clan. Inheritance. Instantly, all of them subconsciously realized that Devil had stumbled upon and harvested the complete inheritance of the exterminated Ghost clan. Ghostly evasion was a temporal layer secret technique. Although it wasn't a sage level skill, according to the system's evaluation, it still surpassed the A-grade cultivation methods. Ghostly evasion was different from the ghostly image substitution technique. The latter allowed the user to cheat death by moving through the void and mainly focused on using a ghost image to escape death by confusing the enemy as well as concealing one's own whereabouts. Due to this, the enemy wouldn't be able to locate the user. Ghostly evasion, however, focused on fleeing speed. Devil was previously acknowledged as the person with the fastest movement speed in the 5th dimension. Besides the Azure Dragon leg guards, that title greatly depended on this secret technique as well. After cultivating it, he could transform into a black line which moved through the air like a ray of light. As his cultivation became higher, the speed of the black ray would also increase. In short, if he wanted to escape, then no one could stop him. However, the ghostly evasion had two fatal weak points. First, it could only be cultivated by people who possessed the bloodline of the Ghost clan. Second, during daylight, the black line was eye-catching and could easily be tracked. Due to all this, it lost all meaning as an evasive move and just relied on its speed. When the group heard about this secret technique, they instantly cried out in surprise. Again, only those who possessed the Ghost clan's bloodline could cultivate it. This requirement was really too annoying. But their harvest wasn't just limited to those two manuscripts. They found another one which was called Ghost King's Body Refining Secrets. This was a temporal grade body refining method which had 85 levels. Successfully cultivating it to the peak would allow its user to reach the peak form of the Ghost Clan Ghost King. With the body as tyrannical as that of a ghost king, they could move unhindered in the whole world. This manuscript was better than the others because everyone noticed that it surprisingly didn't have any cultivation requirements. Every fluxer could cultivate it, though as its cultivation continued to become more and more profound, the fluxer's temperament and shape would come closer to that of a ghost king. Can I cultivate this? I don't care whether I remain human or become a ghost, as long as I can become more formidable, I am willing to pay the price, Underworld Hand and Devil Monkey said almost in unison. You can, but first let me create a cultivation relaying globe for the two of you of this Ghost King's body refining technique. After saying that, Li Yunmu wondered about their eagerness. He hadn't expected that Underworld Hand and Devil Monkey would surprisingly be willing to go to such extremes to chase after power. However, once he carefully thought about it and gathered the rumors and facts from all the major online platforms, he felt that it was ordinary. After all, a powerful temporal layer body refining method was just too rare. It wasn't just a simple cultivation method but rather a way which promised to reduce the distance between them and the sage layer. Everyone knew that the first requirement for stepping into the sage level was to break the limitations on one's own flesh. The human body was like a natural prison. If you couldn't surpass the limitations and break this prison, then how could you still talk about entering the sage level? This temporal layer body refining method could allow not only Underworld Hand and Devil Monkey, but even ordinary sage level characters a chance to reach for the higher layers. Secret techniques and battle skills were fundamentally on different levels. Skills were only the means to display one's power. Even if they were higher level, they would only determine one's combat strength. Secret techniques acting in a different manner. A temporal layer body refining secret technique was related to one's own cultivation bottleneck. Even if it wasn't a sage level supreme secret technique, it would still be valued by a lot of characters on the path to enter the sage layer. Even if one became a member of a transcending power, they still wouldn't have the qualifications to cultivate a supreme secret technique. Only those who were seen as successors of transcending powers would qualify to cultivate the secrets which acted as the foundation for a transcending power. Thus, finding a temporal layer body refining technique among devil possessions implied one obvious thing, and everyone was clear about it. Can I also? Nangonggongzi also couldn't resist. That's okay, but first you must bind your soul imprint to my heavenly world, then I won't discriminate. At this time, Li Yunmu's mind wasn't on this, since this Ghost King's body refining secrets were really a major foundation. He possessed the Great Sun Tyrant body muscle marrow secrets, so he naturally wouldn't cultivate this Ghost King's body refining secrets which was slightly inferior. However, he could certainly create a major power with real foundation using this secret technique. Furthermore, since the system could manufacture cultivation relaying globes, that prerequisite would also be satisfied. Li Yunmu soon discovered the third manuscript passed on by the Ghost Clan Devil Soul Refinement. A Sage Class Cultivation Method. This is surprisingly the rumored Sage Class Cultivation Method. This time, even Li Yunmu couldn't help but be startled. As for Li Qinghong and the others, they no longer even knew how to describe their feelings. What a fortuitous encounter had this devil experienced, No wonder he had always been patiently enduring and hadn't hesitated to discard his cultivation and recultivate. It wasn't just so he could use the Azure Dragon leg guards, but so that under the pretense of them he could conceal having received the Ghost Clan's inheritance. Devil Soul Refinement not only involved the Ghost Clan of the true sixth dimension, but also the highest evolved life forms of the Ghost Clan Devils. Naturally, the Devil Clan had nothing to do with Devil's name. It was a genuinely existing group of life forms in the seventh dimension. Devil life forms couldn't be classified as a race. All of them were solitary creatures, each of which possessed sage layer strength. They resided in the highest layer and were even more terrifying than battle sages. The few life forms which could threaten battle sages in this world lived in the seventh dimension. The little shadow whom Li Yunmu had found previously was precisely one of such creatures. Devils were just like that as well. Li Yunmu shuddered a little while clasping the secret method engraved on some unknown creature's leather. After careful inspection, he discovered that this method pertained to the cultivation of one's spirit and also touched upon the mind. There were 3 layers in Sage layer: ordinary flux sage, domain sage, battle sage. Entering the sage level required one to break the prison of one's body and achieve transcendence over it, but that was just the first step. To take the next one, the person was required to congeal a sacred domain, and the requirement for congealing a domain was to cultivate the spirit. Since cultivating spirit had to do with the mind, in layman terms, it meant strengthening one's spirit. Thus, a soul-refining cultivation method was a necessary requirement for entering the domain sage layer. And the devil's soul refinement was precisely such a method. It could help an ordinary sage to form their own domain. At this instant, everyone turned completely silent. Now, even a pin drop would have echoed like a scream. Li Yunmu couldn't maintain his self-control, because although the system had many cultivation methods, could create supreme body refining techniques, it didn't have any high-level soul refining techniques. Furthermore, even if the system could unlock this sort of soul refining method as it upgraded, it would fall short of this original manuscript. This was because the system's cultivation methods couldn't be transferred outside. No cultivation relaying globes could be created for them. But for this technique in front of Li Yunmu, they could be.